Well, we're living in most dramatic times. Israel and the Middle East is particularly what we want to look at tonight. But first of all, look at what we're just about to. Christ's last appeal to us, brethren and sisters, was those words in Revelation chapter 16. And what he says to us is that the great day of the battle of God Almighty is about to take place. But at that time, here's his final appeal to us. He says, watch and keep your garments. That's what we need to be doing, my dear brethren and sisters. Watching and keeping our garments, lest we walk naked in this very difficult time in which we live. Now, watching, we dealt a bit about that last time. It means, Bullinger has it, to keep awake. Strong's has to be vigilant. That means look at the signs of the times. Allow them to stir you up and help you to be more focused in the truth. But then he goes on to say, keep your garments. And what is that, brethren and sisters? Well, it's the first of all to keep separate from the world, James says, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. There's the negative. Here's the positive. Ephesians says, take unto you the whole armour of God, that ye may be able to withstand the evil, and stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and above all, taking the shield of faith, and praying always. That's what we should be doing now, so that indeed we keep our spiritual garments clean and ready, so that we might find a place together in the kingdom. But now I want to talk just very briefly about Europe. Why? Because a week's gone by and much has happened in just 1 week. Here is the leader of Ukraine. There he is, Zelensky, and he is very, very worried about what's going on. But what he is saying, he says this, a diplomatic solution is more likely. He's under stress. He can see the soldiers building up on the wall on the borders of Ukraine. Now they say about 150,000. They're all somewhat terrified. They're saying, look, if they cross into Ukraine, the death rate is going to be this for civilians and for soldiers. And so he's saying, we've got to work something out. Let's make a diplomatic solution. You know, Putin is putting huge psychological pressure on us, and that's appearing to be what might happen now. But look at this article. It came yesterday, The Economist. Putin targets Germany. NATO's weakest link. What? As the world wonders if Vladimir will invade Ukraine, the battle for the West is already underway. How? Well, he says, you look at what's happening. Without firing a shot, Putin has attacked the transatlantic alliance, you know, the NATO group or the alliance. At its weakest link, says The Economist, Germany. Would you ever think that? Well, all confidence in Germany has deteriorated by last month. That Britain, for instance, flying weapons into Ukraine, dared not fly them over Germany. For fear of overflight denial, circumvented the German airspace to fly defensive weapons to Ukraine. What's Germany? Well, brethren and sisters, it's a territory of Magog. Gog of the land of Magog. We expect Germany to ally itself with Russia, don't we? And things are beginning to take place. While Mrs. Merkel was there, it didn't look likely. But with this new leader, as I pointed out last time, he's showing a bias towards Russia. He's showing a bias towards Russia. Well, now, going to Russia at the moment is Mr. Macron. He's been speaking to Putin for about 5 or 6 hours. What about? And now, a little later on, Schocko, the leader of Germany, is to fly up there. And it looks like they're going to negotiate some sort of deal where Russia is going to be placated and probably get what it wants. Things are moving quite dramatically. Well, we won't go any further on that at this stage because that was our talk last time. But now, all Israel is to dwell confidently. We know that, don't we? You know what Ezekiel 38 says? At least 3 times it says, they will dwell safely or confidently. And also, on the mountains of Israel, the whole of that land to the west of Jordan, they're going to be in control of. So what's going on? We're going historically back through this year, first of all, like we have been doing all the time. Start of the year, vaccination took place. And guess who's leading the world? Why, Israel leads the world in vaccination. They are well ahead of others, vaccinating everybody. Look, they vaccinated 224,000 in a day. In a day. So they weren't mucking around. They operated quickly. And the result was this. As a result, an increasing aliyah of Jews wished to immigrate to Israel. Apparently, immigration, the desire to immigrate, rose 30% and probably was fulfilled. So there were Jews coming from all over the land. Come to Israel, we'll be safer there. But then, as the year rolled by, they went into war with Gaza. They went into war with that little strip of Gaza. Israel lost 12 Jews, and the Gaza Strip lost 232. A lot due to missiles that fired up, and Israel blew them up before they got out of Gaza territory, and they crashed on the land. But Israel was victorious. It was all over in 1 week and 4 days. They accomplished their purpose. They dwell confidently. But next door to them was Russian troops. And up in Moscow, this chappie said, don't you go any further with the Gaza Strip. If not, we will declare war on Israel. And he said that twice. Publicly. Twice. Russia warns Israel it won't tolerate any more civilian casualties in the Gaza conflict. Think of that. So they are under threat. But after that, an election took place. Netanyahu couldn't get together the numbers, and they needed 8 parties. They're the faces of the leaders of the 8 parties to form the new party, the new coalition that ruled Israel. And only with 1 or 2% majority. But look what this man said, Mr. Bennett, their Prime Minister. He said, if you want to say that our land does not belong to us, I suggest you read the Bible first. So he was saying to everybody, the Bible supports our presence in the Middle East. He is somewhat religious. But now we know these words well. In Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 21 to 22, there are 6 steps to a king, Christ's return. 6 steps. And the 6th, one king shall be king to them all, and then come back one. And one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel. Israel's got to control the mountains of Israel. What's that? That's the West Bank territory. Well, what's happening there? Well, remember what Mr. Bennett says? That's ours. The Bible says so. And they have been acting. Look what he said. Very early in the piece, we're going to build another 1,300 new West Bank settlements. And already there's nearly 500,000 Jews in the West Bank. Think of it. They're taking control of it bit by bit. They're taking over. Jews, the property prices here is 1/3 of what it is in the rest of Israel. So a lot of Jews are buying properties here and holiday houses there in the West Bank. So you see, it's gradually being taken over because property prices are very cheap there relative to the rest of Israel. But now, the Arabs, they experience prejudice, quite a lot of prejudice against them. Here's the headline, no amnesty for false claims of Israel's apartheid. Some people are saying Israel's executing an apartheid action towards those poor Palestinians. Oh, look at what they're doing, how mean they are towards them. But look what the Australian wrote. Okay? Amnesty International latest report associated Israel with apartheid. Yeah? 41% of Haifa's university students are Arab Israelis. They are Arabs who live in Israel and have Israeli citizenship. Point one. Point two. Harvard from University from America came over and went right around the West Bank asking everybody, would you prefer to be under the Arab control or under Israel's control? 77% said they would prefer to live in Israel. So no barrier between us, all Israel. We'd prefer that. And a proof of that is, well, in Israel, there's over 400 mosques. Who bulldozed them? Nobody. Not the Jews. They've left them. The Arabs can use them. And here's one mosque that we know. So they are showing an attitude towards the Arabs which is quite friendly, if only they would accept it. But this year is a significant year. Thousands around the world mark the 77th anniversary of the Holocaust Day. It's an interesting year that we're living in, brethren and sisters. And so here we are looking at the Auschwitz over in Poland. And here's poor, what's her name? Can't think of her name for a minute. Anna. Yeah. But anyhow, we remember that, brethren and sisters, the terrible things. Here we are, 77 years. Is that significant? Well, we don't know. But it may be. But now, brethren and sisters, I want to go on to another point about Israel. In Ezekiel 38, it repeatedly says that when Russia comes down, when it makes that inevitable invasion, it comes down for spoil, 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 or plunder, plunder. Plunder. Spoil means booty. Plunder means booty or prey. They're coming down to gain something. What are they going to get if they get little Israel? Well, here's a headline that came up only a few months ago. Look what it's saying. How Israel's shekel became the strongest currency in the world. Huh? Well, it was the growth that took place just that last tail end of last year. Look, grew like that. It was a top performing currency. Early 2020, it was up 10%. Last year, further than that. And there we can see the growth of the currency. What does that tell us? Israel is economically going very, very well indeed. She is prospering. So if Russia comes down, it's going to be things that she can gain. But look at this further. Israel's foreign exchange reserves. They're investing money all over the place. And look at it. Boom. They're growing in money external to Israel. They are rich, relatively speaking. And they've only been going, well, 70 odd years? Haven't been going for long. And part of the reason is this. The Abraham Alliance. Here's some of those countries that aligned with Israel through Trump's efforts. And here's what happened to the trade with Israel. Look, and this is what it became. I tallied the figures up there. So 293 million went to 981 million. Just to show you a little bit of an idea, earlier in the piece, it went up by 3 times in 1 year. It's really prospering. And now, look at the Jews. Israel's population has increased 9 times since 1938. Israel's people are much happier than those in Europe. It has the highest number of scientific publications per capita of the world. It has the largest number of chess master players. You're not surprised, they're brainy. The academics produce more scientific papers. They've got more degrees per head of population. The largest number of startup companies. Bright, clever people, clever industries. The highest percentage of home computers per capita in the world. The largest immigrant absorbing model on the earth. Of course it has. It's prospering like mad. And it's doing this. It's preparing to confront the Arab world. Just last year, Israel said we are producing a special device to defend our borders. They use it briefly in the Gaza war. Missiles came in from Lebanon and they were shot down before they got to Israel. They plunged into Lebanon and they were shot down by lasers. These lasers, look at the strength of them. In a fraction of a second, they can zap. And if missiles are coming in this one, they don't totally burn it out. All they do is burn out the trigger and the guidance network. So it just plunges into the ground. Or those coming in from Lebanon, some of them plunged into the sea. And they don't hit Israel or blow up in Israel. So amazing, brethren and sisters. Whoever thought of that? They say it's the most powerful weapon, laser weapon ever. And probably hugely capable. Now, it's not complete yet. It's supposed to be about a month away before it's all up running properly. And it looks like Israel might be delaying working on Iran till that happens. But as well as that, they've got their own nuclear facilities. What countries were first to develop nuclear weapons? Well, of course, America was. Jews in America did it. They got on the telephone in Yiddish and spoke to the Jews in Israel, and Israel put its first nuclear reactor up in 1958. And now, here it is, Dimona. Much of it is now being built underground. But there's the Dimona nuclear reactor. Quite funny, we went there one time when we were touring past, and our bus driver said, "That's our knitting factory." And we laughed, and he said, "No, I'm not allowed to tell you anymore." We said, "It's your nuclear thing." No, I can't tell you that. I'm not allowed to. But anyhow, Israel has acted on nuclear sites. 1981, it hit Iraq. The nuclear reactor that was being built over there, it just blew it up. There's the flight pattern. Came in remarkably and destroyed it before it even went fissionable. And again, they hit up in the area of Syria. So the implication is clear, isn't it? What's going to happen to Iran if they keep going the way they're going? So there in 2007, they attacked that nuclear reactor up there. There it was before, there it was after they hit it. Amazing. But now we want to look at Russia, Iran and Afghanistan. Not so much Russia, but Russia's influence in the area. That's why I put that in lighter print. All right? So what do we expect? Well, we know from Ezekiel 38 very clearly that the chief, that's the Hebrew word Rosh, prince of Meshech and Tubal, from the uttermost parts of the earth, will ally itself with Persia. Later on, Ethiopia and Libya, we'll look at that later. So they're going to ally themselves with that. And it's quite amazing. Exactly as predicted in the scriptures, on the exact year they were expecting it. The year was written up in the Testimony magazine. They were expecting Russia to move. They thought on Europe. But that year, 2015, they moved in. Sorry about that. They moved in to the northern part of Syria, Latakia. And now they've built up the port. Look, that was a tiny port. Look at it now. That's the Russian port up there. And now they're very muchly on the borders of Israel. There's Israel's border. They've got a big military base 85 kilometres from the border of Israel. And not only that, they are now, just this year, or actually 2022, they're flying aircraft down along the Golan Heights, Syria and Russia. Flying aircraft along the edge of the Golan Heights. Clear implication. Just be careful what you do. Russia could be involved. But not only that, now they're moving into the area to the north again. There's been a big naval manoeuvre by Russia. I couldn't tell you this last time, but that's indeed the case now. Look at the date. And they've been bringing ships down from Sweden, some of their ports up near Sweden, north of Sweden, and bringing them down into the Mediterranean. And here they are. They're landing ships that can carry huge numbers of troops and bring them up onto the coast, and they can get off. Nobody knows what they're there for, except possibly they're going to take some of the Syrian troops to Ukraine or something of that nature. But anyhow, they brought them down here, along with many other ships. More on that in a minute. But now, seeing we're still looking at history, there's Daniel's image. There's the Persian Empire. There's the the Grecian Empire. The silver and the brass. And this year, what happened? Afghanistan. It wasn't part or allied to Russia at that time, earlier the year. But now, oh yes, the leaders there now, the Taliban, as soon as they got to power, some of their key men got on a plane and flew up to Moscow. The Taliban delegation visit to Moscow was a fresh signal of Russia's interest in involving itself more deeply in the regional security issues related to Afghanistan. So again, look at that image. How correct it is. Who knew that? We did. It's amazing what we're seeing. But now come more directly back to Persia or Iran. A new leader came into Iran. The previous man stood down and willingly he allowed this man to take over. He's brutal. He's cruel. They call him the butcher of Tehran. Here's a little example. He's arranged for hundreds of Iranians to be hung who don't agree with what he wants. So here's a crane and a few of the people he hung. He's very, very brutal. So they call him the butcher of Iran. He's taken over Iran, so you can expect Iran to go on a very belligerent path. That's what you'd expect. And he is determined to knock out Israel. That's what he claims, along with many of the Iranians today. One of the things that he built was this. Here's the Persian Gulf, all right? Out of here come a quarter of the world's oil. A little more on that in a second. But coming to power, he's built here, and it may have actually started a little earlier, but I cannot be sure. He's built there where they load their oil onto ships and export it to China and other countries like that. Iran is a major exporter, as we know. 90% of the oil is loaded there, but not anymore. They built a 1,000-kilometre pipeline. It's cost them nearly $1 billion. I think it was 1.1 billion. And this is what they've done, built a pipeline there. Why? Well, they don't have to use the Straits of Hormuz. They don't need to use the Persian Gulf. The implication is that they might try to close the Persian Gulf, and then they can get their oil out too. Now, look at the date. It's going back a bit. But Iran and Russia and China say they will hold a joint naval drill in the Persian Gulf. They said they'll do one at the end of the year, and they have. More on that in a second. But think about it. Think about it, brethren and sisters. The Straits of Hormuz, which is very narrow area here, very narrow area there, 40 ships pass through every day on average. 20 going in, 20 going out, mostly oil tankers. Huge quantities of the world's oil passes through that area there. The world's most important oil transit choke point. Staggering. You think of it. Huge amounts go through. Now, they can close that Gulf off. Stop that oil going out, and they can get theirs out. Think about it. But now, the end of the year came. China, Iran, military drill. 3-day joint military exercise held at the Gulf of Oman. There it was. In that area, here's some of the ships. 11 Iranian vessels, 3 Russian vessels, 2 Chinese vessels, and so on, came into that area just to show that they could close that Gulf off with a blink. Now that's critical. Go back 2.5 years, brethren and sisters, and there was a conflict in the Gulf. You may remember it. When we were worried by it, price of petrol went up here, And our government said we've only got 4 weeks store here in Australia. We haven't got more than that. And we haven't done anything more about it since then. Oh, we did approach the Americans to say, could they provide it if we have a problem in the days of Trump? But that hasn't been renewed in Biden's day. And so we import most of our oil through that Persian Gulf. And it comes to oil refineries in Singapore and such like, then to Australia. We do not hold huge reserves. 4 weeks and we won't be able to drive if the Persian Gulf closes. So you can see it's a gun to the head of Australia, New Zealand, and possibly to some degree Britain. So indeed, another manoeuvre took place. This time, look, Israel, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, USA, they held a major manoeuvre in the Red Sea. Why? Why in the Red Sea? To counter Iran's aggression. They're saying, you don't touch us. Look, here we'll do a big manoeuvre, not right off the coast of Iran, but if we want to, we can close the Red Sea and we can close the Persian Gulf, or we can have a conflict with you. But halfway through that manoeuvre, suddenly Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates abandoned it and sailed their trips home. Sailed their troops, their ships back up here because of some problem the Iranians threatened them with. The whole point of the UN-led naval drill was therefore proven invalid. The whole Israeli strategic goal of distancing from Iran from the southern outlet to the sea had been turned on its head, like that. Why, I don't fully know. Papers didn't say, but it just suddenly broke up. And the Arab ships sailed home. Well, since then, what's going on? Look at the date, brethren and sisters, this year. Raisi, that's this new leader, here he is, of Iran, paid a 2-day visit to Russia, up and back, where he met with Putin's president, with Putin. The trip resulted in great achievements for the Islamic Republic, they say. The Iranian ambassador to Russia has said that possible coalition, of course it is, Iran, Russia and China. They've been doing naval manoeuvres. Now it's talking militarily. But they've been going over and having talks over in Vienna, haven't they? And they've been talking to the Europeans about having peace in regard to the nuclear weapons. And they've had, only a few talks. 8! The 8th round of negotiation. Look at it as here now. And they're achieving nothing. Talks aimed at reviving the collapsed nuclear deal with Iran are now urgent, said negotiators from Britain, France and Germany. They're getting nowhere with them. So what's going to happen? And that lunatic, the butcher of Iran's in charge of Iran. Sometime before that, Mr. Bennett went over to the United Nations 5 months ago, and he spoke to them very, very clearly and firmly. It's on the web, you can see it if you wanted to. And what did he tell them? He said, Iran has crossed the red lines. That's 5 months ago. On nuclear weapons, said Israel. He said this, Israel's got 2 terrible options. Live with a nuclear Iran or bomb it. He made it very clear to everybody. We will not stand still. So there's the situation. And over in Iran, Israel has only months to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities, says the minister. Israel will be confronted for the first time by a fanatical country full of hate and armed with weapons of mass destruction. About June, they said there's only about 4 months, 10 weeks, they said, and they should have enough fissionable material to build a bomb. They've got to know how to put it together. That may be a problem. But some of the papers said they think Iran will go till it's got enough for at least 2 bombs and put it separately in case somebody attacks it. I don't know who would. I think we do. So Israeli researchers, Iran's nuclear breakout could be within a space of weeks. Look at its date. Look at its date, brethren and sisters. We don't know what's going to happen. We know God's in charge. And we know that what's going to happen is going to be in accordance with God's purposes. Now, Iran has been spending a lot of time building weapons. They have no less than 10 listed sites where the nuclear weapons are being prepared, where the fissionable material is being developed. It's growing all the time. Here's some of those bases, as we can see there. And they have the missiles for it, huge missiles. Some of them can be ICBM, that is, they can put them into orbit. They could go all around the world and could hit America and possibly even Australia. Horrifying. But primarily this is their aim. This is their aim. To attack Israel. Well, we know what's going to happen in the long run. God is going to be in charge of things. So how it's all going to outwork, we don't know. But things are looking very frightening at this stage. What could happen is one of two things. One of three things. Israel could send missiles in, blow up their bases. And they reckon they've got the means of doing it. I dare say they have, knowing Israel. Then alternatively, they've spent 1.5 billion shekels to get special bombs in from America. They're bunker buster bombs. It's a name used in the Second World War. It's a bomb that goes into the ground, creates an earthquake. These are dropped with missiles on the back, so they accelerate quickly and punch into the ground and then blow up later and could cause like an earthquake under these nuclear facilities. So what are they going to do? They've got to fly them in. Well, they've got to refuel the planes part way there or on the way back. But during the war about over a year ago, between Azerbaijan and Armenia up here, Israel supported Azerbaijan, sent some weapons up there. And Azerbaijan came back and said, "Thank you very much, Israel, for helping us. Is there anything we can do?" Israel said, "Yes. Can we have 2 of your airports?" 2 of those airports are controlled by Israel. So what's being expected is possibly this. Israel could fly there, refuel their planes, and bomb Iran. Bomb Iran. Consequently to that, strangely enough, Iran attacked Azerbaijan earlier this year because of the fear that those airports would be used. It was a statement to them, don't keep helping Israel. Israel is content. They have been helped. But brethren and sisters, what's going to happen in this area? Further than that, the third possibility is Bennett asked the Mossad, the Secret Service, and they said, yeah, we can fix them. Now, whatever they mean, I don't know, but that's on, you can view it on the web, there where they say that they can fix Iran. Well, brethren and sisters, something's going to happen in this area, particularly ultimately in the Persian Gulf. Brother Thomas said this, in Opus Israel, Exposition of Daniel, Eureka, Herald. He said the Scriptures demands that Britain, and I believe he means the Young Lions, America and such like, will take maritime possession of the Gulf of Persia, the Persian Gulf up here, and as well as that, the Red Sea to Suez. And he based that on Isaiah 18. Because he couldn't easily understand how it all worked, he wrote very little on it in each of them, except if you really want a detailed explanation, it's Old Herald. He wrote at least 10 pages on it in quite detail as to why he thinks that. Well, brethren and sisters, now let's bring our attention to the Gulf states. They will ally with the West and with Israel. We know that. Sheba and Dedan, the Sunni Arabs, will align with Tarshish. Daniel says Edom, Ammon and Moab, that's Jordan, will ally with Israel. Well, we saw this before, but it's too important. When Trump joined up with Netanyahu, he formed the Abraham Accord, and those nations were going to join or had joined with Israel. And there's a map showing those that had joined in darker green and those that would join shortly in lighter green. Well, what's happened since then? Well, the US military to withdraw hundreds of troops, aircraft and anti-missile batteries from Saudi Arabia. Huh? Well, America needed the weapons after Afghanistan. They wanted it for Taiwan. That's what they said. And they pulled a lot of them out of Saudi Arabia, but they said to the Saudis, suggestion, build formal ties with Israel. You join up with Israel, I'll look after you. They're pretty powerful on them weaponry. Trust them. They'll look after you. Join up with them. And when Mr. Bennett came to power, he phoned up the Egyptians. I'll show you that in a minute. But immediately after that, the first place he went to, he flew across and saw King Abdullah of Jordan. There it is. Edom and Moab, allied with them. They were having problems with water, and he said to them while they're there, we'll give you some more water. They were looking after Jordan, but they allied somewhat with Jordan. And he also made a telephone call down to the Egyptians and allied with them. Sorry about that. Yeah. So fascinating. Fascinating what's going on. But as well as that, the US military drill shifts the army base from Qatar to Jordan. Now, their chief base, American base, was over there in the Middle East. But last year, this is what happened to it. It went to Jordan. Are we surprised? Of course we're not. Everybody else probably was, but we know Edom, Ammon and Moab, Jordan, will be allied with the West and with Israel. And so the main base is now Jordan. Staggering. Also, when Bennett came to power, he made sure that one of his key men, Mr. Gantz, Deputy Prime Minister, he joined up with Abbas and invited him to his home. And they had a great chat. The first official trip to Israel in years. Abbas and Gantz discussed security, civil matters in Gantz's home. Think of it. So here's the Palestinian leader coming and talking to the Israelis. Things are switching. And now, look at the date of this. It's only days ago. Here's the leader, Israel's president. There he is with his wife in United Arab Emirates area. He went over to see them there, the leadership, only a few days ago. First visit to the United Arab Emirates by an Israeli leader. Staggering. They're joining up significantly. But now, in that Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, the Gulf of Oman and the Mediterranean is a huge naval manoeuvre. 60 nations under American umbrella exercise in that area. Look at the date. February the 3rd this year. 60 navies apparently. It'll last from January the 31st to February the 17th. It's underway right now. The event will combine 9,000 permanent personnel, 50 ships, and they're in the Persian Gulf, I underline that, the Arabian Sea, the Gulf of Oman, the Red Sea, and North Indian Ocean. There are more to the south of Israel, but there these ships are right now. What's the sense of this? Well, part of the problem is this. Iran, Russia and China are having a joint manoeuvre already in the same area. In the area of the Black Sea, the Mediterranean, the Northern Atlantic, Pacific Ocean and Indian Ocean. All around the world, but also particularly in the Middle East. Staggering. Look at the number of ships involved in their naval manoeuvre. Right now, 140 warships and more than 60 aircraft. Whew. What's that telling us? Well, one thing we do know, that when Russia comes down, It comes down with many ships. And many ships are there already. So things are looking extremely exciting. What it means, I don't know. How long we've got, I don't know. But my goodness, it's amazing what we're seeing. Now let's come across to Libya, Ethiopia, and also the area of Egypt. Now Russia's going to get control of Ethiopia, Sudan and Ethiopia. That's the combined territory is the ancient scriptural region of Ethiopia. More on that in a minute. And Libya, and also, as we'll see a little later on, it's going to be involved in Egypt. So, here we can see this year, Russia calls for deeper military ties with Libya. Here's the Russian defence minister up in Moscow, joining up with the Libyan Prime Minister who flew up to see them. There it is. So the alliance is being formed all the time, growing all the time. See, marches into North Africa. So it's controlling Libya. Amazing. Not fully yet, but certainly partially. And as well as that, what's next for the world's powers in war-torn Libya? Two countries, Turkey and Russia, but predominantly Russia. Yet nothing suggests that either Turkey's military or Russia's group will leave Libya. They're there, it looks, permanently. We would expect that from Scripture. Every bit of it. Scripture is so amazing how accurate it is. And as well as that, Russia has allied itself to Sudan. Now take that Sudan area there. Let's put together the Hebrew or the Bible quote. Ezekiel 38 says, Persia, Ethiopia and Libya. Now the word Ethiopia is the Hebrew word Cush. And if you take Cush, that's that territory. It's Sudan and Ethiopia today. All right, it bridges the two areas. And in that area, Russia has already moved. It has moved into that area. And here we can see a Russian naval base in the area more of Ethiopia. And as well as that, it's the Chinese, who's allied with Russia somewhat at the moment, forming a base there to control the Red Sea if they need to. So it's staggering what we're seeing happening, brethren and sisters, before our very eyes. It's amazing. As well as that, Russia eyes investment in Ethiopia's energy sector. So they want to get involved in oil and natural gas. They're having amazing control of the oil and natural gas going into Europe. And now they're talking about trying to control it in Ethiopia. They're not sort of worrying about global warming and controlling the energy. They want to control this sort of energy. They know how powerful that is to control it. So, Ethiopia and Russia vow to form cemented relationships, clear alliances. Amazing what's going on, brethren and sisters, before our eyes. Exactly what we've expected. But now what about Egypt? Well, we've shown this one before, but 2019 it started. Putin came down to a big alliance, or a big group with all the leaders of Africa. He came down and he promised to invest in Egypt $7 billion in that area to build up an area which he called the Suez Canal Zone. It was a big factory area, trading area and such like. And it would appear that it's along the edges of the Suez. It's hard to know, but that may be what that's formed there. And that's why the name is there. And he said, I will therefore employ 35,000 Egyptians in it. My alliance with you is firm. 2019. Okay? And now, the growing relationship between Egypt and Russia. Strategic alliance or marriage of convenience? Well, they've met repeatedly. 7 times the Egyptian Russians have come together on military grounds and trading grounds. And one thing's really interesting, Russia, is this. The largest ever natural gas field found. Now that's not quite the way it sounds. That is in the Mediterranean. We've got to read it carefully. Zohar is the largest gas discovery ever made in Egypt and in the Mediterranean Sea, and could become one of the world's largest natural gas finds. It was found way back in 2015, but it hasn't been totally exploited because it's quite a way off the coast, look. And they are now getting the pipes to shore. And so this huge base is being set up, almost twice the size of the Israeli oil field or gas field. Almost twice the size. Little wonder Russia is interested in it. And now further to that, look at this. Egypt awards, look at the date, only days ago, 8 oil and gas exploration licences. And they're getting these areas to be drilled where there are basins, where the geologist says there's oil, there's gas probably down there. And so it looks like Egypt is going to dramatically prosper if they find that there. Egypt awarded 8 oil and gas exploration concessions to drill that area. And anybody agreed to do so had to spend 250 million per licence. And people took it up because it looked like gold, so to speak. It's going to be successful, it would seem. And so Egypt is prospering. Look at this. Egypt exports hit a record of 45 billion in 2021. So it's growing, brethren and sisters. Look at the export growth. And look at the dates. That was last year. It is growing, brethren and sisters, and it is prospering. Is that a surprise to us? Well, you'll see in a minute. It shouldn't have been. Well, now, Russia and Egypt discuss a Eurasian Economic Union, a free trade union. So Egypt and Russia is going to be the leaders in this union. And 472 Russian companies have invested already in Egypt. Staggering. Egypt is also Russia's top trade partner in Africa. So you see, things are changing. So when Russia comes down into the Middle East, what's its first and primary purpose? Look at this. We know these words well. Daniel 11. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver and over all the precious things of Egypt. And of course, as well as that, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps or his companions. So you can see, brethren and sisters, when he invades that area and moves through Israel, what's his primary purpose? Well, it's going through to Egypt because of treasures of gold. Well, it may not be gold. There is a lot of gold mines in Egypt which Russia owns. It may not be just simply gold. It may be oil and natural gas. So Russia invades Egypt for a financial reason. Well, brethren and sisters, we've gone through now that Middle East area. We've looked at Israel. We've looked at Iran. We've looked at the countries that have allied themselves with Iran and those that have allied themselves with Israel. So, brethren and sisters, where are we? What should we do? Time looks like it could be very short indeed. Earlier in Revelation, it said similar words to those that we read at the start. In Revelation chapter 3, verse 2, Christ said this, "Be watchful and strengthen the things that remain." Now, there's a few names which have not defiled their garments. Remember what he said? Watch and keep your garments. Don't defile your garments. And they, we pray us, will walk with Christ in white, for we are worthy. Let us remain separate from this world and all its wicked ways, brethren and sisters. And he that overcometh, the same shall be clothed in white raiment, brethren and sisters. White raiment. And I will not blot out his name out of the book of life. Our names are written in it, but it can be blotted out. Let's remain faithful. Walk in that right way. And I will confess his name before my Father, before Yahweh in the heavens, and before his angels. There we are, brethren and sisters. That can be asked. So, he that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto us, brethren and sisters. My goodness, the time seems very, very short indeed. Let us be people who are really focused on the truth and walking in God's ways. The time is very short. And it's only just around the corner. And the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. And we pray we will be part of that group that is established in that day upon this earth. Thank you.